Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to ask you a simple yet profound question. Who is God calling you to be? Each of us was created with purpose, but discovering that purpose requires faith, courage, and trust in God's plan. Let's explore 6 key points that will help us understand and embrace our divine calling. You are not here by accident. The very fact that you exist is proof that God has a divine plan for your life. Before you were even born, He had already written your story, designed your purpose, and set you apart for something greater than you can imagine. Jeremiah 1:05 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." This means that long before you ever took your first breath, God had already placed a calling on your life. You are not just another person in the crowd. You are chosen, anointed, and purposed for something extraordinary. Many people go through life feeling lost, wondering why they are here or what they are meant to do. The truth is, your purpose is already inside you. It is woven into the fabric of your being. The challenge is recognizing it, accepting it, and walking in it. God's calling is not just for pastors, ministers, or leaders in the church. It is for every single one of us. Whether you are called to be a teacher, an entrepreneur, a parent, an artist, or a mentor, your purpose is significant. You were created to make a difference, to impact lives, and to bring glory to God through the work of your hands. Understanding your purpose begins with understanding who God is. He is not a God of confusion, but a God of order. He does not create without intention. Just as every star in the sky has its place and every wave in the ocean moves according to His command, your life is also divinely orchestrated. The gifts, talents, and passions you have are not random. They are tools God has given you to fulfill your assignment. Sometimes people spend years searching for their calling, when in reality, it has been inside them all along. Your purpose is often found in what you love to do, what comes naturally to you, and what burdens your heart. Pay attention to what excites you, what moves you to take action, and what problems you feel drawn to solve. However, knowing that you are called is only the first step. Walking in your purpose requires courage, obedience, and faith. There will be times when you feel unqualified, inadequate, or even afraid. You may question whether you have what it takes or whether you heard God correctly, but let me remind you that every great person in the Bible who was called by God felt the same way. Moses doubted his ability to speak. Gideon questioned his strength, and Jeremiah thought he was too young. Yet God used them all because He does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. One of the biggest obstacles to stepping into your purpose is fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. But fear is not from God. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." When God calls you, He also equips you. He does not expect you to figure it all out on your own. He walks with you, guiding your steps, opening doors, and making a way where there seems to be no way. Another challenge is comparison. It is easy to look at others who seem to have it all together and feel like you are not enough. But your journey is unique. God did not create you to be like anyone else. He created you to be you. Psalm 139:14 says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Instead of focusing on what others are doing, focus on what God is doing in you. Stay in your lane, trust the process, and remain faithful to what He has placed in your hands. Your purpose is not just about you, it is about the people you are meant to impact. There are lives waiting to be touched by your story, your gifts, and your obedience. Someone needs your encouragement, your wisdom, your kindness. When you walk in your calling, you become a light in the darkness, a vessel through which God's love and power can flow. So today I challenge you to embrace your calling. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances, or the perfect version of yourself. Step out in faith, trust God's plan, and walk boldly into the purpose He has prepared for you. The world is waiting. Will you answer the call? Many people struggle to embrace God's calling because they believe their past is too messy, too broken, or too shameful for Him to use them. They feel unworthy, burdened by mistakes, failures, and regrets. But the truth is, God specializes in redemption. He is not looking for perfect people. He is looking for willing hearts. Your past does not disqualify you. In fact, it may be the very thing that equips you for your purpose. Throughout the Bible, we see story after story of people who had flawed, complicated, and even sinful pasts, yet God still used them in powerful ways. Moses was a murderer, yet God called him to lead His people out of Egypt. David committed adultery and orchestrated a man's death, yet God still called him a man after His own heart. Rahab was a prostitute, yet she played a role in the lineage of Jesus. Paul persecuted Christians, yet he became one of the greatest apostles and wrote a significant portion of the New Testament. These examples are not just historical stories. They are reminders that God's grace is greater than our past. One of the biggest lies the enemy tells us is that we are too broken for God to use. He whispers that our mistakes define us, that our failures are final, and that our past is a permanent stain we can never erase. But God does not see us through the lens of our past. He sees us through the lens of His purpose. Isaiah 43:18 says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." God is always ready to do something new in your life, but you must be willing to let go of the shame and step into His grace. God does not call us based on our perfection. He calls us based on His plan. Sometimes He even uses our past as part of our testimony. The very things we are ashamed of can become the things that inspire, heal, and encourage others. Someone needs to hear how you overcame addiction, how you rebuilt after failure, how you found healing after heartbreak. Your story has power because it points back to God's mercy and transformation. One of the most beautiful aspects of God's grace is that He does not just forgive, He restores. He does not just erase our past, He turns it into something meaningful. When Peter denied Jesus 3 times, he must have felt like a complete failure. But Jesus did not cast him aside. Instead, He reinstated him and gave him a mission to feed His sheep. Peter went on to be a bold preacher, leading thousands to Christ. It is easy to believe that because of what we have done, we are not worthy of God's love. But the truth is, none of us are worthy on our own. That is why grace exists. Ephesians 2:8-9 reminds us, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." You do not have to earn God's love or prove your worthiness. He already sees you as valuable and has called you for a purpose beyond your past. When we dwell on our past, we often hold ourselves back from what God is trying to do in our future. We stay stuck in guilt, afraid to step forward because we think we are not good enough. But God is saying, "I have already forgiven you. Now move forward." Philippians 3:13 and 14 encourages us, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." Your calling is ahead of you, not behind you. So today, make a choice. Choose to believe that God's grace is bigger than your mistakes. Choose to trust that He can use even the broken parts of your story for His glory. Choose to walk boldly into the future He has prepared for you. The past may have shaped you, but it does not define you. God's purpose does. And if He has called you, nothing in your past can disqualify you. Obedience is one of the most important aspects of walking in God's calling. Many people want to know their purpose, fulfill their destiny, and experience the fullness of God's blessings, but they struggle with the idea of surrendering to His will. The truth is, your calling requires obedience. It is not enough to simply hear God's voice. You must respond to it with action. God does not just reveal His plans for your life to give you information. He reveals them so you can step into them. Throughout the Bible, we see how obedience was the key to unlocking God's promises. When God called Abraham to leave his homeland and go to a place he did not know, Abraham obeyed without hesitation. He did not ask for every detail. He simply trusted that if God called him, then God would guide him. Because of his obedience, Abraham became the father of many nations, and his descendants were blessed beyond measure. Similarly, when Jesus called his disciples, they left everything behind: jobs, families, security, to follow him. They did not wait until it was convenient. They obeyed immediately, and their obedience changed the world. Obedience often requires stepping out in faith, even when things do not make sense. When God called Noah to build an ark, there was no visible sign of a flood. People probably mocked him, and the task must have seemed overwhelming, yet Noah obeyed. His obedience saved not only his family, but also the future of humanity. Sometimes God will ask you to do things that seem illogical, uncomfortable, or even impossible. He may call you to start a ministry, forgive someone who hurt you, or take a leap of faith into a new career. If you wait for perfect conditions, you may never step into your calling. Ecclesiastes 11:04 says, "Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." You cannot wait until you have every answer before you obey. Faith requires movement, even when you do not see the full picture. One of the biggest barriers to obedience is fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses hesitated. He doubted his ability, questioned God's plan, and tried to come up with excuses. But God reassured him, saying, "I will be with you." Exodus 3:12. That same promise applies to you today. If God has called you, He will equip you. He does not expect you to do it alone. He will walk with you, strengthen you, and provide everything you need to fulfill your purpose. Obedience is also a test of trust. When God calls you, He is not just giving you an assignment. He is inviting you into a deeper relationship with Him. Every act of obedience strengthens your faith and draws you closer to Him. Jesus said in John 14:15, "If you love me, keep my commands." Our obedience is an expression of our love for God. It shows that we trust Him more than our own understanding, and that we are willing to follow Him even when it is difficult. However, obedience is not always easy. It often requires sacrifice. You may have to give up comfort, let go of your own plans, or take a path that is not popular. But every act of obedience brings rewards. When Peter obeyed Jesus' command to cast his net again after an unfruitful night of fishing, he pulled in more fish than he could handle. When the widow at Zarephath obeyed Elijah's request to make him a small cake first, her flour and oil never ran out. God always blesses obedience. If you want to walk in your calling, you must be willing to obey even when it is hard. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. Partial obedience is still disobedience. When God calls, the only right response is, "Yes, Lord." Your destiny is on the other side of your obedience. Do not let fear, doubt, or hesitation keep you from what God has prepared for you. Trust Him, obey Him, and step boldly into your calling. Each person is created with unique gifts, talents, and passions. These are not random abilities or coincidences. They are clues to your calling. God has placed something inside you that is meant to be used for His glory and to impact others. Many people spend years searching for their purpose, not realizing that it is often hidden within the very things they are naturally drawn to and gifted in. Your gifts are divine indicators pointing you toward the path God wants you to walk. Romans 12:6 says we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. This means that everyone has been given something special by God. Some people have the gift of leadership, while others have the gift of teaching, encouraging, creating, or serving. Some have a passion for music, while others are drawn to business, problem solving, or working with children. Whatever your gifts may be, they are not just for your benefit. They are tools given to you to fulfill your purpose and serve others. One of the biggest mistakes people make is dismissing their gifts because they do not seem significant. They compare themselves to others and feel like their abilities are too small to make a difference. But God does not give insignificant gifts. Even the smallest talent, when used for His glory, can have a massive impact. Consider the boy in John 6 who had only 5 loaves and 2 fish. In human terms, it seemed like nothing, but when he placed what he had in Jesus' hands, it fed thousands. The same principle applies to your gifts. You may feel like what you have is not enough, but when you surrender it to God, He multiplies it in ways you cannot imagine. Sometimes people struggle to recognize their gifts because they come so naturally. What seems easy for you may be difficult for someone else. Maybe you have a way of making people feel at ease, solving complex problems, or organizing events effortlessly. These are not just personality traits, they are divine indicators of your calling. Pay attention to what excites you, what others often compliment you on, and what you feel most fulfilled doing. These are clues pointing you in the direction of your God-given assignment. Your gifts are not just about what you can do, they are also connected to what burdens you. Many times your calling is linked to a problem you feel passionate about solving. Nehemiah, for example, was deeply moved when he heard that the walls of Jerusalem were broken down. That burden led him to step into his calling as a leader and restorer. If there is an issue that stirs your heart, whether it is helping the homeless, mentoring young people, or creating opportunities for others, it is likely connected to the purpose God has placed within you. However, discovering your gifts is only the beginning. God calls us to develop and use them. Just like a seed needs to be watered to grow, your gifts need to be cultivated. Proverbs 18:16 says, "A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men." This means that when you refine and use your gifts, doors will open for you. Do not be afraid to invest time in developing your skills, seeking mentorship, and stepping out in faith. Many people hesitate to use their gifts because they feel unqualified. They believe they need to be perfect before they can walk in their calling. But God does not wait for you to be flawless before He uses you. Look at Moses. He was called to be a great leader, yet he struggled with speaking. Gideon was called to be a mighty warrior, yet he saw himself as weak. If He has placed a gift inside you, He will give you the strength and wisdom to use it effectively. Ultimately, your gifts are not just for you. They are meant to serve others and bring glory to God. 1 Peter 4:10 says, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." When you operate in your gifts, you not only find personal fulfillment, but you also become a blessing to those around you. The world needs what God has placed inside you. Do not let fear, doubt, or comparison hold you back. Embrace your gifts, develop them, and use them boldly. They are the key to unlocking your God-given calling. The people you surround yourself with have a significant impact on your journey and your calling. No one fulfills their purpose alone. God designed us for community, for relationships that encourage, challenge, and strengthen us. The right community matters because it shapes your mindset, fuels your faith, and provides the support you need to grow into who God has called you to be. If you are walking in isolation or connected to the wrong people, you may struggle to move forward in your calling. But when you align yourself with the right community, you will find strength, wisdom, and accountability that help you stay on course. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. This verse reminds us that we need people who refine us, challenge us to be better, and keep us aligned with God's purpose. A strong community consists of people who encourage you when you are weak, correct you when you are wrong, and celebrate you when you step into your calling. The right relationships push you toward growth, while the wrong ones pull you away from it. This is why it is crucial to be intentional about who you allow into your inner circle. Throughout the Bible, we see the power of community in fulfilling God's purpose. When Moses was called to lead the Israelites, he did not do it alone. He had Aaron to help him speak and Joshua to fight alongside him. David had Jonathan, whose friendship strengthened him in his most difficult moments. Jesus himself chose 12 disciples not because he needed help, but because he knew that community was essential in spreading the gospel and building the church. Even Paul, one of the greatest apostles, was surrounded by people like Barnabas, Silas, and Timothy, who encouraged him and walked with him in ministry. These examples show that no matter how strong, talented, or called you are, you need the right people around you. One of the biggest dangers of walking outside the right community is being influenced by the wrong voices. The people you spend the most time with shape your beliefs, your habits, and your direction. 1 Corinthians 15:33 warns us, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. If you surround yourself with people who are negative, unmotivated, or disconnected from God, their influence will eventually affect you. You may start doubting your calling, compromising your values, or losing your passion for what God has placed inside you. This is why it is important to seek relationships that align with your faith and purpose. The right community also provides accountability. When you are walking in your calling, there will be moments of discouragement, doubt, and even failure. Having people who can remind you of your purpose, pray for you, and hold you accountable to God's standard is invaluable. A true community does not just tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear. They correct you in love, challenge you to keep going, and remind you of God's promises when you feel like giving up. Ecclesiastes 4:9 says, two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. You need people who will lift you up when you fall, not those who will keep you down. Another reason the right community matters is that it creates opportunities for growth and collaboration. God often works through relationships to open doors, provide wisdom, and connect you with people who can help you reach the next level. Many times, your calling will require you to work alongside others, whether in ministry, business, or personal growth. When you are in the right environment, you will find mentors, partners, and friends who help sharpen your skills, expand your vision, and strengthen your faith. However, finding the right community requires effort. You must be willing to seek out godly relationships, invest time in meaningful connections, and sometimes walk away from unhealthy ones. It is not about having a large circle of friends, but about having the right people in your life. Pray for God to lead you to a community that aligns with His purpose for you. Be open to mentorship, small groups, church communities, and friendships that help you grow spiritually and personally. At the same time, remember that being part of a good community is not just about what you receive, but also what you contribute. Be the kind of friend who encourages, prays for, and supports others. Be someone who sharpens those around you and helps them grow in their calling. When you invest in the right relationships, you will not only find strength for your own journey, but you will also become a source of strength for others. God has placed people in your life for a reason. Some are there to help you grow, some to challenge you, and some to walk alongside you. Do not take those relationships for granted. Surround yourself with people who uplift you, challenge you, and remind you of who God has called you to be. The right community is a key part of fulfilling your calling. And when you walk with the right people, you will go further than you ever could alone. Walking in your calling requires faith, not comfort. Many people want to fulfill their purpose while staying in a place of security, familiarity, and ease, but God rarely calls anyone to a comfortable life. Instead, He calls us to trust Him, step into the unknown, and rely on His strength rather than our own. Your calling will stretch you, challenge you, and take you beyond what you think you are capable of. If you wait until you feel completely ready or until everything is perfect, you may never step into what God has planned for you. Faith requires movement, even when you do not have all the answers. Throughout the Bible, we see that God consistently calls people out of their comfort zones. When God told Abraham to leave his home and go to a land, He would show him. Abraham had no map, no clear details, and no guarantees. All he had was faith that God would guide him. If Abraham had waited until everything made sense, he would have missed out on the promise God had for him. Similarly, when Peter stepped out of the boat to walk on water, he was doing something impossible by human standards. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he walked in faith. But the moment he focused on his circumstances, he began to sink. This is a reminder that faith is not about having control. It is about trusting the one who does. Many people miss their calling because they are unwilling to leave what is comfortable. They want to hold on to security, routine, and predictability. But God does not call people to stay in places where they do not need Him. He calls them to places where they have to rely on Him completely. If you look at Moses, he had every reason to stay in Midian, tending sheep and living a quiet life. But God called him to confront Pharaoh, lead a nation, and step into an assignment that seemed far bigger than him. Moses had to choose between staying in comfort or stepping into faith. The same choice is before you today.